waking up to the fact that they have no input in terms of impacting Bitcoin whatsoever, and they're moving from thinking, oh, we're going to Bitcoin, knowing now that they can't ban Bitcoin, to understanding that it's a fear of missing out, or FOMO. The countries that hoard and mine Bitcoin the biggest and the fastest are going to be in a much better position than the latecomers. That's the current position amongst various governments, except for in Europe, where they are literally brain dead, where the EU is coming out and making it clear that they're not interested in participating in the 21st century economy whatsoever. They died. The only thing, but they haven't been buried yet. So that'll come probably in 2022, because I noticed that the euro is going to
Hmm.
be parity with the dollar and heading to new all-time lows, probably in the 60-cent region. So the entire EU can be flushed down the toilet, because the leadership there are bureaucratic, sclerotic morons. They can be just disregarded entirely. I think Elon Musk will probably buy France and turn it into a place that's worth going to.
Just side note, were you happy that he bought Twitter?
Sure,
You
why
love
not?
free speech.
But Twitter was
You,
being manipulated by folks that were against free speech, and Elon Musk recognizes that free markets and free speech are who you are. If you're somebody who's into education and you're a professor and into monetary history, you write a book like Dean Amus. If you're somebody like Michael Saylor, who is in the software business, in Virginia, who's kind of close to the center of power in DC, who does, I would imagine, some contracting work for the government, you would have some comments about the U.S. government. Michael Saylor has also said he sees Bitcoin as being world reserve asset and the U.S. dollar as being world reserve currency. Now that's I never understood that argument. I don't think that argument makes any sense. Nobody who's looked at it says agrees with him on that. And that's not going to be the case whatsoever. The dollar is completely being destroyed. It's being flushed down the toilet. The price is at a high relative to the last few years of performance, but usage amongst global economies is dropping. It's under 60%. It'll soon be under 50%. And we've seen a major sea change in the
hmm
last few months,
Yeah,
Daniela, because we went from a 40-year bull market in the bond market and a
that's right.
40-year bull market in let's call it the Reagan Thatcher era of deregulation and financialization. We are now in a new era, which is going to be driven by commodities, right? Russia basically called asset for the next 10 years, but I don't see the US dollar, as Michael Saylor argues. I don't buy that argument whatsoever. So I'm not surprising that he would have a favorable disposition toward comments coming out of the US government.
Yeah.
I don't see that as being important or relevant either in any case, but he's a guy who supports dollar as world reserve currency. So I mean, if it's his MO, that's fine. But I don't agree with it, and I don't. The Bitcoin is not in any way tied to any government's position toward it. Governments have only one decision: either start mining and hoarding Bitcoin or become irrelevant.
Okay. Okay. So let's just you mentioned Russia, so let's go there a second. And I want to give you kudos because 2 years ago, at my former outlet, you had called out saying that you could see Russia working on linking the price of the ruble to gold and other commodities. And that's basically what we're seeing today. They say they're working on it, but as you know, when we hear news reports that they're working on it, it usually means it's already done. What does this really mean? What does it imply? How big is the impact?
The impact is huge. As I've just been saying, the transition from Russia is now talking about tying the ruble to gold, having a gold-backed ruble, and I also talked about China at that time. I think China and Russia, Iran, and the other BRIC nations are all in a good position
Yeah.
now going forward. They're all commodity based. And this idea of tying currencies to gold will become much more talked about in the near future. Russia's obviously come out and said it now. China is still, I think, going to come on board. We could see, a joint effort. to tie those currencies to gold. So yeah, this is what's happening in the gold market, and it's not a good look for the U.S. dollar.
So let me ask you this. You and I both know Russia has been buying gold all these years. Have they been preparing for this exact moment?
Absolutely. Look. I mean, what I find remarkable is that Russia, for the last 20 years, has communicated in a very open and transparent way what they're doing, why they're buying gold, their position toward NATO, their position toward various geopolitical events that are going on. They have not been hiding their thoughts at all, and now. You go from a unipolar U.S. dollar reserve currency to a multipolar world with a few different currencies out there. So you have the dollar, which will be a fading currency. You have a gold backed ruble, which is going to be aligned with China, Iran, Brazil, the BRIC nations. And then you have Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is being adopted by countries. We see that now in Central America with El Salvador. And we can talk about this new fund we're starting, by the way, in El Salvador called El Zonte Capital. You can get information about it if you do an email to hello@elzontecapital.com. And we'll see other regions in Central America and Latin America begin to adopt Bitcoin. And now we see more action in Africa. There's a country in Africa today that just announced they're making Bitcoin legal tender. So that will be a big theme in Africa. Those countries looking to leapfrog the entire fiat money system and banking system and just want to just leap into the 21st century, that they can just go to a Bitcoin standard and bypass all this malarkey with central banks and fiat money and all the bureaucrats. They can just go to a hard money Bitcoin standard and be immediately participating in the economics of the 21st century. So we're going to see that. So those are the three developments as the US dollar fades away. You get a gold backed currency in those countries that have been aggressively buying
So,
gold for decades, principally Russia, China. And then you have big. So, number one, you don't have true price discovery in gold, right? The price, as we see, it doesn't really move, even though the inflation is absolutely out of control and the money printing is out of control. It's gold is not moving because you don't have genuine price discovery in gold because there's too much of concentrated in a too
but
few
so it is
hands of.
moving, but you want leaps and bounds. Is
No, it's
that
not
the kind of
moving. Over
move you
10
want?
years, it's done nothing. It's at 0% in 10 years. It's been dead money for 10 years, Daniela. That's dead money. I mean, it's underperforming cash. It's underperforming negative interest rate sovereign bonds. It's probably the worst. It's horrible. And so you don't get any price discovery. And the industry, that Frank Juster represents, a point made in that debate that you had a year ago with these two. Michael Saylor made the very excellent point that the industry itself is constantly selling gold, and they're not putting gold on their balance sheet. They're not hoarding gold. They're just gold salespeople. They talk a good game, but they're not
Right,
actually for
right.
gold in that way. The industry has a long track record of dumping its own product and manipulating the price of its own product